Hola amigos de Retumba, soy Robin de The Ocean y aquí vamos a hablar de Holocene ahora.
Hello, Robin. Welcome to this interview. How are you tonight?
Very good, very good. Had a long day at the Pelagic warehouse and finally back on the roof to enjoy the sunset.
Perfect. Well, thank you for accepting my invitation. So far it's been a week of the album release. How has been the response so far of the album? Is it what you expected to be?
I try to go through life as much without expectations as possible, which is not always possible, but at least when it comes to my music, I really try to just let myself be surprised. And so I'm not sure what I was thinking it would be like, but I'm quite surprised that everybody seems to really love the record. Surprised because I think it's a bit of a polarizing album in a way.
Yeah.
But it seems that really everyone loves it, including our older fans who are into the more heavy material, and that's, I think, the part that surprises me most. But if you really look at it, it makes sense because it's only on the surface is it an album that is less heavy. I think those heavy parts that are on the album are more impactful than on any other record, just because of the fact that it's not heavy all the time, you know. So I think this is what people seem to. This is what even the older fans seem to appreciate about the record. So yeah, response has been really good across the board so far. So I'm very happy.
The very nature of this album, as you mentioned, is like polarizing. Did that give you insecurities for this album release, or as an artist, what kind of thrill or emotion are you looking for in the new album process or cycle?
No, I think we're pretty sure and very confident now that we enjoy the privilege of being able to do pretty much whatever we want musically, and our fans and listeners will follow. It has not always been like that. I remember when we released Heliocentric, for example, in 2010, which was the first record with Loic, and predominantly clean vocals. A lot of people were saying this is not metal anymore, you know, and there have always been complainers. But I think by now, those people that are still there or new to the table, they appreciate the diversity that this band has to offer, and also the fact that we're not trying to stick with a certain formula and then just repeat that over and over again. But that we're challenging us and our listeners with a bit of a new direction from album to album, and I think most people will appreciate that now. So I was not too concerned. It always felt like an Ocean album to me. You know, initially when we started working on those songs, Peter and me, we were not sure what this was going to be. Like, we weren't even sure if it was going to be an Ocean album or some other project. You know, it was mid-pandemic and we were just writing music. But when we were done with that session, it very much sounded like The Ocean, and it became clear pretty quickly that this was an unwanted child of an album, but it was an Ocean child. So, yeah.
And what about Peter's demos made you work with like electronic dose approach or mood in the overall arc of the album, and or even approach the album as a different, like, collaborative process?
Yeah, it was quite a different process. Like the making of this record, or the writing of this record, and the making of this record, actually. The writing was different because it was for the first time ideas that were not my own that I worked with. And that was very inspiring because I really liked those ideas. They really resonated with me. And I felt like picking up my guitar when I heard them. So it was great to not, for once, not start a song with a blank page, you know, but with something that was already there. And that worked really well. It was at the same time liberating and invigorating as it was confining in a way, because obviously when there's already like a structure or an idea that somebody else has written, then you have to work with it. So it's kind of like, you know, painting something on the canvas and giving you a direction. But I found that very enjoyable to work with that and to see what I can add within the constraints given and within that realm given. And yeah, so it was different from every other Ocean record on that regard already. And then the making of the record as well, we kind of recorded everything ourselves this time. With most previous records, we usually went into a good studio for at least the drum session to initiate the record. And this time we recorded it at Peter's place. Peter has built himself an amazing studio in the North German countryside, in an old mill building, and it was finished pretty much just before the recordings of this album, so we could use it. It's a perfect drum room, and everything else we did in Berlin, where we also built ourselves a little setup, like a rehearsal space and a little studio room. So everything was done pretty much within our own circles, and that was also very good and liberating, because it meant we had more time available. We could do it at our own pace and not always look at the clock, and just really spend as much time as we wanted with this record. And I think this is going to be the way for the future as well.
Well, I always like when a band introduces new elements to their sound, like something new in the language or the evolution of the band. Sometimes it feels organic and sometimes it feels like disruptive, but like it functions well with the concept or the idea. Are the electronic parts of Holocene like a new present element for the future of the band?
Time will tell. We try to not think too much about the future albums, or which direction we want to go or something. It's usually something that is reflective of where we are at that given moment in time when we start writing. And I don't know when we will start writing the next record yet, but It feels to me that it's probably something between a new direction and a detour. I can tell you that I wrote another album at the same time as Holocene, which is mostly my songs, while I was working on the Holocene songs with Peter. And that album has not been recorded yet. It's in the pre-production stage, but it is more riff-oriented, and it's a bit more connecting with the first half of Phanerozoic 2, while Holocene is connecting better with the second half of Phanerozoic 2. So it's like, looking at it from that end, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily a new direction that we will take with Holocene. But the synths have become a more integral and important part in our sound over the course of the past 5 years, pretty much, ever since Peter joined the band. I think it took him some time to find his place in the band, creatively and as an individual and as a musician. So on Phanerozoic 1, he was mostly doubling the guitars on Mooks. He was playing all the time, but it wasn't much lead stuff. And I think now with Holocene, he's gotten a lot more confident and daring to try things, to try different sounds, and to really write songs for the Ocean. So that is a development that has already occurred, and we're not going to revert that back, because we feel that he's very important for the band and what we do live and in the studio. So there will definitely be synths that are kind of like more in the foreground than on previous records, but Holocene might be still a bit of an exceptional album. It was in every aspect, like I said, it was different from every previous Ocean record, and so the future will tell.
So in that sense, it can be, or it can be calculated as a one-time thing only, right? Holocene, and then maybe follow on that process or mindset for future releases.
Like I said, time will tell. That second record that is already written, it's pretty much there, so we're going to record that. But then the next record after that, I don't even know how old we will be when we will record that. So a lot of things, there's going to be a lot of water down the river until that moment, and we will see where we stand then.
And is going to be released soon?
No, definitely not. Like I said, it's still in the pre-production stage, so we have not started recording it yet. And now we will start preparing for the Holocene touring cycle. So this will keep us busy for the next couple of weeks. Then we will start playing summer festivals again. And in September, October, we're going on a European tour, and after that to the States. So we will be touring with Holocene quite intensely, I believe, in the coming months. And that means we will not have time to record that next record yet.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're very quick with writing, but everything that comes after that always takes a lot of time. Like recording, mixing, mastering, and then working on the artwork for Holocene was a project that took well over a year, basically. So yeah, unfortunately, that always takes time. So I honestly have no idea when that second album is going to come out. Definitely not in 2024, I can tell you that.
Okay, so the new stage of the band after the next release is far away in the future, but I can imagine that the challenge is going to be to make a choice of, okay, are we closing the walls for the next album, or open even more, have more range to discover things? I mean, that's going to be like, I don't know, a debate for the band and how direction to follow next. Do you think?
I think we don't usually think much about these things. We do what feels right at the moment when we start getting together and working creatively together. We do what feels right, and we all have a very diverse taste of music and listen to a lot of different stuff in the bus or in the van. Not that much metal, to be honest. We also come from Berlin, which is the capital of electronic music, and obviously that has left a mark on us, and there's lots of awesome cutting edge stuff coming out of this city right now. And so I think Holocene is a reflection of all of that, who we are as individuals and where we are, and what we listen to. And when it comes to the ocean, we're luckily in the privileged position to be able to do whatever we want to do now. So anything is possible. And when it comes to writing that next record, we'll see where we are.
I'm curious about one thing I saw you mention months ago about Holocene sounding as you always wanted for the ocean to sound. So my question is, what about the sound of this album, or the experience of making it as it is what you envisioned years before for the band?
Yeah, pretty much. We wanted a sound that was huge and fat and very organic at the same time, to contrast the electronics, which are mostly analog synths, by the way, so it was not that we wanted to make it sound less digital, but we wanted to have a very organic and roomy sound, and that was challenging because the music material on the album is very diverse. There's obviously the parts that are kind of like sparse and like thinly instrumented, where you can have like a huge drum sound, but then there's also very dense parts like the end of Unconformities or Subatlantic, where this approach to mixing simply wasn't working out because there's too much musical information happening, so it was difficult to find a compromise that worked for both the heavy parts and the calm parts. And at one point we thought we were chasing ghosts. We asked a lot of people to test mixes, and we weren't really getting the results that we were hoping for. And in the end, we just got more confused and, got to the point where we were like, this is never going to happen, or it's never going to sound as we want it to sound. And that was the moment when we turned to our old friend and associate, Carl Daniel Lidén, for help. And he delivered the test mix that was really as close as it could be to what we had in mind. And so it turned out that it was very much possible and very much for real what we had in mind. It just took a long time to get there, and I think those detours with all these test mixes in the end were a good thing, because they made us more aware of what we really want and made us be able to put that in words. And I don't know if that would have been possible without first seeing all these other people approach the mix of this record. So I think it was a good process, but something I only want to do once. I don't want to do that with the next record again. Because it was very tiring and just frustrating in a way, and I'm glad we did it now, and I think the picture is now a lot clearer for future albums as well, like how we want that band to sound.
Yeah, so what I like about this album, or fascinates me even, is exactly that you mentioned, the approach of electronic. It gives this organic effect to the mood of the album. I mean, when you use electronics, it could sound artificial, mechanical, or just very alien element in the music, but you choose give it a proper integration to the mood of the band. So in a way, it sounds organical, like the natural evolution, as you mentioned, the logical evolution of the band, and at the same time, it just sounds original, but very much intended or with that intention. And at the same time, it feels like this is an album of ending things, closing chapter, and as well a new I don't know, horizon for the band. So I can see why it was hard for you or for the band to like get all these ideas in the proper context or order for the whole process. How conscious are you that the ocean is currently like a staple of experimenting and innovating with the mixture of electronics and rock, post metal sounds?
I don't know. This is up to people to decide, I guess. We're too deeply involved, and like I said before, we don't really think much about how we want to be perceived or what scene we want to resonate in. We express what we feel deeply and what feels right to us. And some people put it into the prog context, some people put it into post metal, some people put it into something completely different. I think this record has a lot of elements and a lot of different approaches, but challenging us and our listeners has always been important for us. And at the same time, not just for the sake of experimenting, but for the sake of finding exciting new rooms behind doors that were closed before, and opening these doors and discovering the worlds that lay behind it somehow. So this is for me the romantic ideal of experimentation. It's always for the purpose of creating something musical and not just for the sake of noise or just doing something extremely innovative that hasn't done before. I think that is no means by itself for us. It's always about the music and the emotional content that we want to communicate somehow and that we want to express. So absolute yes to experimenting and challenging and trying new things, but the purpose is always to write catchy and captivating music. I will say catchy. It might sound wrong to a lot of people, but yes, I'm like my standards to myself and my songwriting are now that I really want to compose songs that stick with you, that you remember and that cause an intense emotional reaction, and not just songs that are intricate for the sake of being intricate. I've been through that stage also, and when I wrote Aeolian or Precambrian even, I just wanted to write very long and convoluted and complicated tracks, and I don't see that as an end anymore. A good song can consist of 3 parts. We've done that for the first time on Holocene with tracks like Primordial, pretty much, or Boreal, very short songs that I always thought would not really work within the context of this band, but it does. And that is also an expression of getting older and growing up as a musician and shifting paradigms and shifting desires to how under what premises you want to create and what you want to create. So I think in that regard, Holocene is probably maybe a bit more mature than previous records, because we feel like a lot of times we don't have to fulfill certain expectations of how many parts we need per song, or how complicated something could be. There's some very simple songs and there's also some quite complicated ones, and in the end it's the music and the emotional response it causes that is important to us.
Well, I want to mention a couple of things you brought up. One is you are in an interesting position because you can, from one side, see this part of music as art. You as a musician delivering art work and what your mind has to offer. And on the other hand, you are running a label that is very much involved in showing what is new, what is cool, what could be a next, facet of music. So this in a way makes you feel responsible somehow as an artist putting out new music, and at the same time, when you decide to work with a band, that this band has something unique or honest to offer to the world.
Yeah, of course. That is very important, and now more than ever, because we really have to limit our output with Pelagic. We don't want to do more than 2 releases per month because we believe that we tend to lose focus then, and also our audience, and the releases start competing with one another. So what we do is extremely limited, and we really have to take very strict decisions now regarding what we want to release in the future. And one of the absolute fundamental things is that it has to be something that is genuine and something that is somehow pushing boundaries, and obviously very well delivered in good sound and all the prerequisites that everyone would quote instantly. But it's more than that. Just a good record with a perfect sound and is not enough to be something that we will consider. So it's like a lot of things that go into the equation, and sometimes it's hard to say. So, I mean, listening to music is such a subjective thing. You can discuss about it forever, but in the end, it either resonates with you or it doesn't. And a lot of it is very personal, and like there's just things that you like and that cling with you and stick with you. And sometimes there's just something that you don't like about it. You can't even say what it is. So we also have a lot of controversial discussions about it. But yeah, I'm very happy that we get to work with so many awesome bands, and it's just such a pleasure for me to not only have to focus on my own music, but to also be able to release music of other bands that I believe in, that I think are outstanding, and to help them reach a crowd, and that's a massively gratifying thing for me. So I enjoy the label work as much as the band work, really. It's just it's two different sides of the same coin, essentially. But I've always enjoyed management and the other side of the music industry, other than playing an instrument. I've also always enjoyed that, and I think I need both realities to not get bored.
Right. Well, there's a lot of questions on my mind. I will follow with. This is your first record of the ocean entirely with Pelagic Records. How was it? Was it hard to make the transition in terms of production?
No, not really. I mean, we've been with Metal Blade for many years. They've always put a lot of work into our releases, and they've done a great job at it, and they've really built the band in many ways, to the point where we are now. So I'm very thankful to them. But the time was right now to emancipate ourselves from being dependent on an external label. Over the past 12, 13 years, we have built up similar structures with Pelagic than what they have in terms of distribution, in terms of promotion, in terms of the work that a label does, really. And I felt that our setup is not inferior to what they had to offer to us. And in the end, we were negotiating with them, but we didn't come to an agreement. And what I could offer with Pelagic to the band, if I kind of like detach myself from that, which sounds a bit abstract, but I tried to really do that, was simply better than what they had to offer to us. So it was a rational decision to do it ourselves. And it was not less work than ever before. It was very comparable, because even when we were with Metal Blade, Paul and me were preparing Pelagic has always released the Ocean vinyl, so all the production we've always done ourselves anyways, and all the pre-order and bundles and like everything we put together and the packaging is always something that we've done ourselves anyways. So on that end, not so much has changed. We hired our own promotion for this, and it worked out very well. But it's an experienced team of people that we work with on a regular basis with Pelagic, so we also knew what we were letting ourselves in for. And yes, it was tremendous amounts of work, but it was always like that before. So in the end, it's not that much of a difference for us, I believe. It made sense for the band, and it feels great and liberating to have control over really every aspect of it. Budget involved, and to not have to have discussions about how much you want to spend on ads or digital marketing or videos, but to simply be able to decide these things yourselves with your own reasoning was greatly liberating.
Well, so far it shows in your marketing of the album, and it kind of gives it a full circle because you mentioned at some interview we had before that the initial input to start your own label was Metal Blade suggesting it, right? To like make reruns or reissues of your past releases. Well, I guess this album means much more for the band than just another cycle. It has to do with something much more deeper in the dynamic of the band, which I guess is great for the band. So congratulations on making it to this point, which I guess it talk about success in a way, being successful as a band.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we've been around for 22 years now, you know, so it would be sad if we were still in the same place as 10 or 20 years ago. People eventually I strongly believe that if you do something well and with passion, then people will take notice. It might just take a long time. You know, there's bands who go from 0 to 100 within 3 years, but that is pretty rarely the case. Usually it's the result of many years of touring and many shit shows played everywhere around the world. And then eventually, if you're persistent enough, people will notice. And I think this is what's happening now, or what has been happening already for a while, that we've just been around long enough to make ourselves a name on almost every continent slowly. And yeah, it's great to see that. It makes everything a bit easier, but it's also simply necessary to be able to continue what we do. You know, like this band takes up so much of our time. Like the last, basically between August 2022 and February 2023, those 6 months, we were on tour non-stop, pretty much. We played 155 shows in 12 months altogether. So half of the year just goes into the band, and it's kind of a full-time job. You know, we need to be able to sustain ourselves with this, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it. And yeah, so I'm very happy that we're finally in a position where it's slowly getting there. And it's still challenging because especially touring overseas is very expensive these days, but it's going in a good direction, and I'm happy about that.
Well, about one thing that you mentioned before about you making music, I mean, and when I mean the band as a whole, making music for the sake of the art or create like a real experience instead of the spectacle. I kind of read some things about the society of the spectacle for this album. It interested me what this concept or analysis brought up in our times. So my question is, what kind of observation are you making through the lens of Holocene, or why it makes sense for the era of Holocene?
We use the term Holocene pretty much synonymous with the modern age. You know, not just the moment when humanity popped up, but like mostly the recent times, also when this album was written and created, which was in the middle of lockdown. So we were obviously under the influence of a lot of weird things that were happening around that time, immediately around us. And I think most of the lyrics on Holocene were written under that influence. It is kind of our least conceptual record in a way that every track has its own topic, its own agenda. But at the same time, all these topics are kind of related, and they're all kind of like dealing with recent phenomenons. And yeah, maybe it's also I mean the postmodern with its credo of a multitude of different views and opinions and topics is, you know, kind of represented in that approach that the lyrics are taking as well. You know, like every song has its own topic and its own focus point. But yeah, I think it's also due to the like making process. It was a bit of a patchwork. Like we were really writing vocals and lyrics here song by song and not in a chronological order. Like, we kind of like picked out the tracks that we felt inspired to work on, Loic and me, and then started recording vocal lines. And then after that is done, I started writing the lyrics for it. This is how we always work. Loic initially just sings and comes up with intuitive ideas, but there's no lyrics. It's all gibberish and data. And then once we have the melodic arches and the rhythmical phrasing, that's when I start writing lyrics, and the vocal recording session for Holocene was spread out over many months because we were touring in between, and so it was like divided into different sessions that were quite far apart, and in between we had a lot of time to let these ideas like resonate with us or not, and also to take some distance and then go back to them and change things around and try different things. And that's something we've done a lot with the vocals for this record. I think we have never before taken that much time to write vocals. And in a way, I think it was good because having that distance allowed us to try other things. And, sometimes when you go back to an idea 2 months later, you realize, no, it's already pissing me off. Like, I can't hear it anymore, and then it's nice if the record isn't made yet and you have the chance to try something new. On the other hand, it might be reaffirmed. Like, you might be unsure when you record it, but then you go back to it and you're like, this is fucking awesome, and so like this is something we could do with this record for the first time, really, that we had a lot of time and a lot of distance to really develop the best parts vocally. But that also led to the whole vocal process being a bit of a patchwork, and I think this is reflected a bit in the tracks and the topics that this album deals with.
But you also have a lot of time to digest the experience of the album and choose how to present it to the public by choosing singles, because it's curious how you choose to present the beginning and the ending of the record. It's like giving, I don't know, some kind of spoiler to the experience, but I guess over time you became sure of which songs are better to keep as a surprise, right? Because for me, in the experience of the album, there are 3 songs that are substantial to the album, and it goes from Atlantic to Conformities. Those 3 songs are what makes the whole album for me, but I don't know, how was your process behind?
Well, I think singles are always a bit of a spoiler alert, because they take something out of context. And for a record like Holocene, it was extremely difficult to pick singles because we felt that none of the tracks really represents the album as a whole, So we were aware of that. And then I guess we got to the point where we kind of intentionally tried to mislead people. So like Pre-Boreal, which I think is a very strong opener, but it's also like a quite short track, and it's a little bit anticlimactic. Sea of Reeds as well, actually, So I think we picked tracks that would confuse people in a way, as to what this record really is. And we enjoyed that. And we knew that you have to listen to the whole thing to get the full picture. And we also knew that most people will do that anyways, So it didn't really matter
right.
which songs to pick out as singles. And I think a lot of people, now that they listen to the whole record, they started getting really into it. That maybe didn't get the full picture from the singles that we chose to present. So yeah, it's always a very difficult process. And at one point we were just like, fuck it, we can just take any track. There's a reason why each and every one of these songs is on the record. And so right. which ones do we pick out? We could do it completely randomly. But I do agree with you that for me, especially, Atlantic is a centerpiece of the record. And we decided not to make a single for that. To have something that will reward people who will listen to the record as a whole, and Conformities obviously is a bit of a surprise track. Probably we were debating premiering that as a single. I think that could have worked very well, but in the end we decided against it, and also to keep it for the record. And another consideration was also music videos. You know, we wanted to have videos for each track of this singles this time, and we were planning to make a video for Unconformities, but that didn't work out. It is still in the making. There will be a music video for Unconformities, but it's going to come out later in the fall. The initial idea and team we had fell apart, and that was the moment when we decided to not use it as a single, but to take another track instead.
I have a brief conversation with Paul weeks ago, and he mentioned precisely Unconformities being a hard song to finish because of the vocals of Karim Parks and how the band wasn't like sure how to work with them. Can you expand a bit of that, about how this song was exceptionally hard for the band?
I'm not sure I perceived it that way, to be honest. It was a bit of a difficult track to write vocals for. Like, I had certain ideas, and I tried them with Loic, and that didn't really work out. Like, he didn't really feel that. It didn't sound as I was hoping it would sound in the end. And he also had some ideas, and it just didn't click somehow, you know? So that was the moment when we felt that maybe we need some help with this track. Maybe we should ask someone to approach it with fresh ears, you know, and to have a guest vocalist on the album was something that we've done with most of our previous records, so it was not a far stretch. And Karen was someone that I have been a fan of for many years, and that I knew through her work with Arabrot and her solo stuff, all of which I'm releasing on Pelagic, obviously. So she was on my shortlist for a long time, and I sent her the track, and she liked it and instantly felt inspired. And I just roughly introduced her to the album concept, and then she did everything herself. She wrote the lyrics and the vocal parts. And when she sent us those tracks, we were awestruck. You know, like, it was just perfect, and they pretty much ended up on the record almost exactly as they were. So in a way, it was comparable with the experience with Jonas, who guested on the Phanerozoic records. It was also very intuitive and like instantly to the point. And I think we have a good feeling for that with the people we ask to contribute. You know, and we've never gone wrong somehow. So that was great. Unconformities is a very polarizing track and a very weird track, because it kind of like unites all the extremes that make up the scope of this band's sound, you know. And the beginning is very, very melodic and catchy, and with a very unusual drum beat for the ocean, you know. Yeah, I don't even know why. Like, to me, like, when I wrote it, it had this almost like this Chemical Brothers vibe, you know, like from coming from the drums and the guitars, and somehow at the same time it worked within our realm and our field, and it was just a bit of a track that stood out. And then at the end of it, it transforms into this super heavy like assault on the senses, really, you know. And that was I think that was not a conscious decision, but kind of the fact that the beginning was so catchy and poppy kind of like probably triggered my subversive side, and just wanted me to contrast that with something extreme at the end. And to destroy the beauty that had been built up to this point, you know, and like in a very cliche way. But like I said, that was not a conscious decision. It was just something that happened, and somehow I felt that after this this bridge section, the song could have either ended,
right,
or it could have continued. And in the end, I felt like I want to continue it, and that's what led me down this track. And so it was a track that was very challenging and out of the box writing wise, and that naturally implied that for the vocals it would be much easier to find the right approach to it. And I think that's why we tried a bunch of different things and eventually discarded them in favor of what ended up on the record, and we're super stoked about that. I think Karen sits very well, not only on this track but also on the record as a whole. When you look at the order of tracks and when this comes, it's like the 6th out of 8 tracks. It's about 2/3 into the record, and this is a point when often even very good records lose momentum just because you get to the point where you're like, okay, now I know what's going to happen for the last few like now I get the idea what this record is all about. And in that very moment, that is shattered with this track, because it's a different vocalist, it's a different track also, and then once you've just gotten into the vibe, then it's again changing to something extreme, and something that hasn't been there on the record up until that point. So it's really a track that destroys expectations, and that was kind of like I think that's the function of the song within the context of the record as a whole, and hopefully also a reason why the album in the end is greater than the sum of its parts, because you really need to listen to it from the beginning to the end, and then you will fully appreciate this track within the context of the record.
Well, for personal experience, Families is my favorite track exactly because of that, because by then you're kind of, okay, I get the idea, right? But then this song starts and immediately it's surprise, it like exacerbates the senses, or like the mood that you had before. You were relaxed, but it gives you like a sense of alert in your senses. And then the heavy part is one of my favorite delivers for the band, one of my favorites vocal delivers, of course. And it's curious that this is just one phrase repeating over and over and over until the end, right? Well, because vocally this is also like the most complex, poppy, catchy hooks I have heard from Loic, but at the same time it has this other part which is just very basic, primal screaming. And in an important part of the album, like this is like the breaking point for me, like the climax of intensity, and then you have the 2 other songs which are like just bonus tracks of the experience. Like, okay, I passed the worst, I passed the best, and it's nice, it's a good time to just enjoy the view, right? For me, at least, that's the kind of experience I had for Holocene.
Yeah, I agree to some point, but I also don't think that the 2 following tracks are just
bonus
obsolete or like bonus tracks. No, they're also very integral for the record. And like I said, it's this track had to happen, otherwise that would have been the last track of the record, and that again would compromise what this album is about, because that would be too cheap to let the album culminate at the peak of intensity and then just cut it there. It's something we've done before, and that would have been too simple here. Like, we wanted to reach that peak about 2/3 in, and then still wind down with the following 2 tracks in a way. And in a different way, Subatlantic is also a very climatic part of the album. It's not as fast, but it's also a pretty heavy part that is built up out of like a trip hop beat, basically. So in a way, it's a comparable track to Unconformities in terms of structure, I think. But this just felt like the perfect closing track. And I don't know, like with this album, the whole track order was pretty clear to me from the very beginning. So like the songs were all written as individual pieces, but the kind of sequence outlined itself to me fairly early, and it all made sense and left not much room for choice. Like, it was completely clear that Subatlantic was going to be the closing track, and where we wanted to have Unconformities and Atlantic, and also that the first 3 tracks, actually the first 4 tracks including Atlantic, have to be one piece. Like, for me, that is one continuous block of music, and this is how we're going to play it live as well. We're going to, I think we're always going to play these 4 tracks in that order. They just belong together, although those track marks, to me, they're like one piece. So I think the dynamic of the record as a whole was something we paid more attention to here than previously, and I think that's paying off in the end. hopefully.
And it's a nice, also has a nice contrast between being a busy record, like multiple parts, and at the same time enough space so that you don't feel oversaturated with
Yeah.
textures and all of that. And I can imagine that was a bit tricky. So it's like a nice balance between composition and sound design also. And what I like about the experience as a whole is how first the treatment of electronic it is very specific. You mentioned Massive Attack, but there's like a whole movement for that kind of mood, trip hop, psychedelia type of thing. So it feels like you have to adapt rather than use electronic for your sake. So for me, that's an interesting experimentation, like commit to the other range or other spectrum of music. And this is what I like, what I celebrate of bands like Grounded, for example, which I think is like another, it's right up there with the newer point of view in terms of heavy music, modern heavy music. And this is also like your discovery or the label discovery, and I'm curious about how this relationship happened between you and Playgrounded.
I was made aware of this album, which was pretty much already fleshed out in its final form by that time, through a common old friend and associate, Costin Ciureanu. He's a Romanian artist whom I met at Roadburn years ago, and he was having an exhibition there. And he did a couple of shirt designs for the Ocean in the past. And Costin wrote me after I hadn't heard from him probably in 2 or 3 years. He wrote me and he was like, okay, I never do this, but you really have to listen to this band. And that record. And because I knew him, I did. And that was it. I was instantly hooked. It's a completely groundbreaking record in so many ways. Like it's very intricate, at the same time very groovy and calm. It's intricate and heavy and complex, but it has this great dignity and calmness. That is just really mind blowing, and that is stemming partially from the electronics and the very innovative use of electronics, which isn't like synths and keyboards, but a lot of like. I don't know how to explain, a lot of like rhythmical soundscapes, and it's very very modern in a way, and reminds me of contemporary electronic artists like Moderat more than of keyboards and heavy metal. So this is something that really resonated with me, but also like the songwriting and the rhythmical complexity that is very hidden in a way. Like when you listen to it, it's always groovy, and you always feel it's musical, but at the same time it's very complex what's going on there, but you don't really realize it's not for the purpose of showing off. So all of these aspects made me instantly fall in love with that record. And we took the guys out on tour, on a last headline tour in September, October. So I got to see them live every night, and they're just an incredible band that is really ahead of its time. And hopefully the world will notice, because they really deserve it.
And hopefully you will take it on tour for South America in the future. I can only wait.
That would be fun. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, to have that experience combined. Well, at least for me, I kind of get similar values for this album as with Playgrounded. I don't know if you felt at some point inspired or challenged by your artistic ego, but I feel like this album gets up, stands in its own way, and is trying to tell, okay, we can be very much innovative too. And for me, these are two current leaders of a sound or of a notion of just how it should be and what it is about progress in music. And this is part of the narrative I am getting from Pelagic Records. I've seen some of your press releases often, and you criticize how prog has become like vanity over substance. Like play a lot, show off yourself instead of making it about music, about the experience. So there are a lot of labels capitalizing on how prog is, or what is cool about prog. But you, on the other hand, as like one of the labels which are doing like a great job, I must say, and showing up or exposing alternative approaches to prog or the notion of prog. So is this in a way like a goal in mind when working with new bands or making a new catalog for the label?
I'm not sure if it's a goal. It's more an expression of what resonates with me as the person who's usually curating and choosing bands. I mean, we all discuss it in the team, but I do most of the A&R stuff. And I've always disliked prog for the wanky aspect of it and the show-off Guitar Hero parts. That is just not what I like about progressive music, and while you can admire a lot of these bands out there in terms of technical skills, a lot of them just don't do anything for me emotionally, and so it was just never my cup of tea. And everything I release is a direct expression of what I like about music, and so yeah, I don't think there's ever been like a dedicated decision to release an album because of an analysis of how it is. Like it's always like a quite intuitive thing, something sticks with me or it doesn't, but it's just like these this Guitar Hero prog is just not for me, and I'm not impressed for that. It takes for me to trigger my my appetite somehow. And I like subtle stuff. That might sound ironic because maybe the Ocean is not really a subtle band, but I like it when something is very impactful, but not in a
direct or in your face.
Not in a spectacular way, not like in a way where it's drawing attention with spectacular means, and in the end it's a big facade. Like I like it when it's something that comes from behind and is subtle and deep somehow. And going back to that Playgrounded album, it's the perfect example of that. It's almost modest, but it's also fucking insanely captivating. But the delivery is kind of very subtle and subdued and quiet and calm and with a lot of dignity, like I said. And this is what I love about it.
And what is unique about Playgrounded is like the unique background of the band that gives them like a different insight coming onto these sounds, like with on-trendy views of it, if that makes sense. And that makes it very original, very authentic, very to be honest, I'm just fascinated by Playgrounded to these days.
Very, very happy to hear.
Yeah. And I was very excited that when I saw that it was a product of Pelagic Records, because usually and nowadays, I have to say, talking about post-metal progs or just like the new wave of extreme music, the current, sounds are usually found in Pelagic Records. So I guess you guys are doing a great work because it's showing off great results. And it's already shaping, I would say, the landscape of heavy music. How often are you receiving like submissions to the label and rejecting them?
Most of the time we're not rejecting them, we're not even listening to them. And that is not because of ignorance, but because it's too much and our schedule is already very full. And I think the only time I've ever signed a band because of a demo submission was Low. They sent me a demo back in 2016, I think it was. And I really liked that mini CD that they sent me. But most of the time it's us discovering bands, either ourselves or through recommendations or other people in other bands, and not through people sending in demos, like word of mouth, somebody saying, hey, really check out this band, they're amazing live or whatever. And if it's a trusted person, then we will do that. but it's rarely submissions, like someone sending a demo. It does happen. I mean, we listen to stuff in the warehouse, you know, like today just somebody brought over a vinyl record as a demo and we were listening to it, you know. But it's been quite rarely the case that we signed bands because of that. And we also we don't want to grow anymore as a label in terms of the number of releases. We feel that if we do more than 2 per month, then our own releases start competing with one another, and we want to avoid that. So we're pretty happy with the schedule that we have right now. Our subscribers, they kind of expect 2 releases per month. So that's why we all decided that this is a healthy pace and a healthy schedule. And more than that would be harmful, you know, on the press end, basically. So we are limited to pretty much 24 slots per year, and there's a lot more releases that I would like to do, actually, you know. So there's simply no space for listening to anymore.
There is one song on this album, Sea of Reeds, which reminded me about one of your new signings after the Burial. Or the Burial? At the Burial?
After Burial at Sea.
Burial at Sea, yeah, Burial at Sea. And can we expect a new album of that band in this year?
Not this year, but early next year. It's currently in the making, and it's going to be an incredible record. I already know from the pre-productions. That is actually a good example. Like, that is actually a band that I signed simply because of demos in a very early stage too. But the demos were so overwhelming in many ways already in their imperfect sound. They just painted the picture of a very diverse and very special record. And obviously the band already had a bit of a history, so you know, it was not like a no-name band sending us a demo, but that was another exception, actually, where we really listened to an album at a very early stage, and we were all like, this is going to be awesome, this can't go wrong, you know. So I'm very much looking forward to that record. I think it's going to drop in February or March next year.
Oh, awesome. So you focus only on demos and not like the past catalog of a band, for example, A Burial at Sea, which has like an awesome record before?
To be honest, I haven't even listened much to that.
Okay.
I have listened to it a few times, but I signed them because of the demos for the new record. And only after that, I started listening to the previous record, which I had listened to a couple of times, but I wasn't really like a fan of the band before. So I think they really became something else with this, or they are going to become something else with this new record. And that. It depends on the band, you know. Sometimes I really dig deep into the catalog. When I started working with Lustmord, I was listening to the entire catalog of 30 records over the past 50 years that this guy made, you know. I knew 1 or 2 of them, but I wasn't really familiar with all of his catalog, and that's always very interesting to discover something in hindsight then and really get into it. So that also happens. But in the case of that band, it was really the new material that triggered me.
Well, I'm hoping for March next year. Let me just suggest you a name that hopefully you can listen to in the future. They are from Belarus. The band is called Nebulae Come Sweet. I don't know if you're familiar with the name, but just recently they released a fantastic album, which is very much on the line, on the trenches of Pelagic Records. So hopefully you will take some notice of them, because if I can see them with a label, it has to be Pelagic Records, because the sound is great, is just very much innovative. So again, Nebulae Come Sweet. And with that, I would like to ask you: are you currently working on new releases for the label or new findings?
Well, we have our year is already completely full. So the focus will be on, the upcoming releases that we have planned for the rest of the year. I can tell you briefly what it is. There is a new Bear record coming. There is a new Arabrot record coming. There's a new Saba record coming. And there's a new Brickville record coming, all of which are awesome. So this is all bands that we've already released before. So those who follow us will kind of know what to expect. We're reissuing one of my favorite heavy records of all times in August. It's called Asexual Anger by a French band called Love Sex Machine. Came out in 2016 originally, and the band hasn't been very active lately, but this is an absolute classic for me, and I'm very happy and proud and honored that I finally get to release that under the roof of Pelagic. So that is coming out in August, and they also have a new record coming out early next year, which is also mind-blowing. So that is something I'm very much looking forward to personally. And finally, I need to mention that upcoming Swerve record. We are only now starting to release an early single of it this week. That album is absolutely out of control. It's I became a fan of them with their previous record Myra, and I watched them in Norway when we played a festival with them in like 5 years ago or something like that, and I was like, wow, what's this band? It was really, really good. But this new album is really something else. It's combining super epic orchestral post-rock, really, like we're talking Godspeed You Black Emperor as a reference, with Norwegian folk and some very heavy instrumental metal as well. So it's like it's a very eclectic album that is definitely one of my absolute highlights this year. That's coming out in September. It's titled Reassured, and so watch out for those guys. That record is going to make waves, yeah, it's not only mine, but actually one of our absolute highlights, and probably the most played record in the warehouse this year at Pelagic. So this is much hitting our core nerves right on the head.
So it's like your champion for this year. The latest champion.
I wouldn't want to say that. That's kind of like asking a dad, like, who's your favorite children? Who's your favorite child of all your children? That would be not fair to the others. But of course, there's like, there's those records that no matter who's in the warehouse, that will always end up on the record player. And it's just one of those, so it's not just me playing music there. It's like all of us. And that record this year is definitely one of the most played records. So that's why I just said it's kind of like hitting the Pelagic nerve, like pretty much right on the head.
Yeah. Well, I want to use your perspective and your brain for a bit here and ask you about, with your experience and your point of view in the business, what are the names in the current heavy music landscape that you think are doing best work, like innovative groundwork in terms of, I don't know, the next generation or the new paradigm of extreme music?
That's a tough question. I think there's a lot of pretty groundbreaking stuff going on. Not everything I get. There's bands like Imperial Triumphant, for example, which I just don't get, but I find it very fun to watch them. I just saw them in Roadburn, but it was enjoyable. But musically, I don't get it. I'm too old for that, probably. I really enjoyed the last Spotlights record. I think that is a really fucking great record. It's that just came out on iPack like a couple of weeks ago. I listened to that a lot. It's great. And other than that, let me look at my playlist, what I recently added. But I haven't really been listening to. A band called Iron Gin that I also saw at Roadburn. That record is fucking fantastic. really, really good. They came out of that San Diego takeover at Roadburn a couple of years ago and became a band after that only, and they played their album release show at this year's Roadburn, and that blew me away. That was really, really good. Another Roadburn discovery, Sierra, electronic music, super heavy, very, very good stuff, that I also discovered fairly recently.
I've never been broken.
This is all old things here. Yeah, there's so much, man. Like I don't know. Like I haven't been listening to a whole lot of heavy stuff lately. Most of the things in my playlist, which all of you are welcome to check out, it's called Isolation Medication on Spotify. All of that is mostly not heavy guitar music, but if you go deep into the playlist, then you will get to the heavy stuff.
Well, I like the miscellaneous playlist.
20 hours. It's about a 20 hours list of tracks, so there's like a lot in it.
It's funny how the bands that you mentioned, they all come from Roadburn Fest, which I think is like the best festival in the world for like new kind of projects. I hope to one day come visit the show because I heard amazing news and amazing stories of that festival.
It's a very good to discover music and just hang out and enjoy a beautiful weekend.
Yeah, I take notice of one band this year coming out that was a product of that festival. Is Sol and Barma, Icelandic project that played in 2018 in Roadburn, black metal, Icelandic black metal, and it's just amazing. I don't know if you are into black metal, but speaking about like the most forward-thinking aspect of the genre these days, there's a band called Ransi Pasusu. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yes, of course.
I think the last album is amazing.
Yes, it's fantastic. I've also seen them multiple times live, and I'm also a big fan of Waves of Space Orchestra, which is kind of, some of the same guys, and they reinvented heavy music, I believe. Both Ransi and Waves of Space Orchestra, fantastic bands. Yeah, absolutely. I can very much sign that.
Yeah, I think these days the landscape is like changing. Just new models or ideas of how music can be approached. I think it's one of those, like, instead of going into the violence, very back, very much very interesting. And also like electronic hardcore connections with Nicolas sound. Well, it was nice to talk with you. I have a couple of questions. Lastly, if you could simulate the concept of Holocene for another piece of existing work with a movie or painting or a book, which one would you see and why?
I would have to think about that for longer than I have to answer this question. I think it's a work that stands on its own. It wasn't inspired by any it wasn't inspired by any people. It make a lot of references to the society of perspective in not only the lyrics of the opening tracks, but also words, letters, that have a sense of core. Each track has a full agenda and purpose, and we cutting it short to say that the whole album would be represented by that. It was, it would self-emphasize it somehow. And it's also not inspired by a movie like, when we wrote Pelagic, that whole album was based around Tarkovsky's Stalker movie, which, and for Holocene, there is no such thing. Every track has its own topic, and in that way, it's difficult to find like one work of art or one book or one film that really represents the record of a whole. I will have to think about that. Time will tell, I guess. Yeah.
And while making a reflection of the society of the spectacle, what do you think is the place for a band like The Ocean, say, in this society of the spectacle, which, funnily enough, contradicts itself? Like, for example, nowadays, the stories or the spectacle is about mocking off, like mocking our way of life, but then like losing seriousness of the topic. So would you say that The Ocean is more of the spectacle or about real experiences, finding those situations?
We're definitely not a spectacular band. And I think we made that pretty clear with this record, which is not a record that ignites within the first 5 seconds in a spectacular way. It's a record that takes time to get into in order to fully appreciate the album as a whole. And a lot of the tracks are very anticlimactic, there's tracks like Atlantic, which do reach their boiling point, but after a long time. There's also tracks that never really reach the boiling point, like Primordial or Sea of Reeds, and we intentionally tried to underline that with the music video we did for Sea of Reach as well, for example, directed by our old Australian friend Adrian Shapiro. It's a clip that basically just shows beautiful structures and textures, and you don't really know what it is for most of the duration of the clip until the very end, when you realize it's fabric, and then you realize it's a dead body. But you only see that when the song's kind of almost already over, and so it's a delicate anti-thesis to the whole realm of short attention span content that is being generated these days, in music videos, but also in music writing, actually, where everything has to instantly kick and hit hard. Otherwise, you're going to skip it in a playlist or on YouTube. And with that video clip, we wanted to make that clear that you're really missing out if you're limiting yourself to that. And I think Holocene as a whole is a statement against that as well. And and an appreciation of the good old album, which you need time to digest, and where every part has its function and its purpose, but that is not becoming obvious when you go immediately directly to the part. You need the history of what leads up to it, and you also need the appendix of what comes behind it somehow. So I don't think it's a spectacle record. I think it's hopefully quite the opposite.